Okay, here we go. Okay, so tell me your name, age, and your profession.
Hasmikk, 28 years old and actor.
What was your sibling diagnosed with?
My brother was born with Down syndrome and has needed a pacemaker from birth.
Okay. So how old were you when you found out, or when he was diagnosed? Is he
Well,
older?
we no, I'm older by 2.5 years, so he's about to turn 26 in June. Um, but I mean, I think I would like my earliest recollection was like I feel like fairly young that like something was wrong or off or um, it just I don't know. There was always like a lot of commotion in the house, so I feel like if I would have registered, it would have been at a younger age for sure.
So, like, when you registered that something was like off, like you said, what was going through your mind? If you can, like, recall.
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, from a really, I can't really pinpoint like what age it would be, but I felt sort of like kind of like an innate or primal sort of I guess like just like this feeling of like having to protect my brother.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was maybe the first thing that would have been registered because it wasn't. I mean, as we've gotten older, it's he's my sibling and he's my brother, but he's definitely um, somebody that I look after.
Yeah.
So I think from a younger age, I almost saw him like in a weird way, like he was like my kid.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it totally does. And it actually ties into another question. Like, did you feel, or do you feel responsible for helping take care of your sibling?
100%. Like he as far as I am concerned, as far as my family is concerned, like I work not to have just a life for me, but to also make sure that I can establish a life for him.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always known from even like my adolescence that we would always be living together, that no
Yeah.
matter what the outcome would be, that he would live in a house with me, um, just for our like entire foreseeable future.
Did you ever feel like you were neglected or maybe not as important as your brother?
That question actually sort of made me laugh because I never felt neglected from my mother, or I never felt that I was. But like a month ago, my mom had mentioned that I, at like my early teens, I was sort of uh, had like a little bit of like, well, you do all of this for him
Mm-hmm.
and nothing is done for me, which just I think comes from like that selfishness of being a teenager. And
Yeah,
maybe it was like a
totally.
culmination of like years of also trying to give myself to my brother and my family and not going out on certain nights or not having that guilt and not wanting to leave the house thinking that like, well, he doesn't have the capability of leaving or like he doesn't have like the friendships that I do or he doesn't have the life that I do. So going out was always a struggle. So I think maybe like when that like tantrum kicked in was probably just like years of being of built up sort of tension.
Okay.
But other than I mean it's fun. I can't even remember it, but she had brought it up to me. I mean, yeah, I can't remember it at all. And she's like, "No, you definitely said something like that." It's like, "Okay, great."
um, so what was it like for you to grow up with a sibling who has Down syndrome?
Um, it's weird because a part of me would like to say that like it didn't feel that different, but I know that it did. I know that I always found myself having a lot of aggression towards people who I thought were sort of looking at him in a different way. I built like a very like strong wall of
Mm-hmm.
it's not like it's not like resentment or anything, but it was just like not even giving people like an opportunity to get to know my brother before I immediately like tried to protect him.
Yeah.
So there was like a lot of walls built up in the sense that like I think I had a lot of aggression, or I took everything very personally when it could have simply been like misinformation. Um, and it was hard. I mean, like um, he wasn't, he's not like developing as like quickly as other children, and he sort of stayed at a very like young age. Like even now he's 26 and he still sort of acts like a 13-year-old. So it's like trying to, I don't know, I think I just assumed the role of his mother, not to say that my mother wasn't around, but I just kind of like put my childhood aside a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, and I think I didn't want other people to really understand that he was different.
Yeah.
And I don't know why it was like trying to hide that, where like as of like now it's like I sort of in a weird way I like celebrate his disability. I wouldn't even call it a disability. Like I celebrate his humanness. And
Mm-hmm.
I think when I was younger, I was always trying to, I was like on the offense a lot. Like I was just very, very much just being like, no, he's fine. I mean, this is just how he is. He's fine. And just not letting anybody really get like too close to him.
What advice do you have for other kids who just found out that like their sibling has like a chronic illness?
Um, just to like, love is like, love is so important. Making sure that they feel loved, that they feel welcome, and to know that you don't have to bear all the responsibility, and you are also human, and to sort of go through this process together, and to also feel like you're not alone, and to know understand that like whatever you're feeling, they might be feeling it to a way higher degree, um, and to not I don't know. I think being open is like such an important thing, when it comes to like mental health, or for any sort of like disability or chronic illness. It's trying to manage that, find a balance between coping, but also still like enjoying life,
Yeah.
and to find the positive from it, which is always so important.
That's a pretty awesome answer. Okay, so what do you think was the most difficult in having a brother with Down syndrome, and also what were like some positive things that you got out of it, or that you have gotten out of it?
I think that the most difficult thing, I wouldn't say, I think the most difficult thing for me, which is so funny because it's such a difference between like what's difficult for me and what would he would probably consider difficult for himself. But what was difficult for me was um, seeing kids like not treat him well,
Mm-hmm.
um, and not having the language to explain to them the situation.
Yeah.
What was difficult was also seeing how he like struggled with like schoolwork,
Mm-hmm.
and knowing that like he wanted to learn, and he's so interested in music and has all these different instruments, but also like can't really function to learn how to play them like well, or to play them at all. So it's just like these fun things that he has, and knowing in the back of my mind like it almost like hits me as like a, oh my god, like there's so much potential there that like could have been the case if you weren't born with this.
Yeah.
So I think that's been what's most difficult for me. But I'm not even sure if he registers that, which probably leads me to like what is the most um, positive thing, and that would be just the fact that like he truly enjoys life, and he is an example of how I would like to live my life. Um, because he doesn't really have a worry, and it is the most enlightening thing on a daily basis. So he has sort of become an inspiration for me in terms of like when I am truly feeling at my lowest, I really just pick up the phone and I call him and I hear his voice and I just like I feel settled and I feel calm, or I go and I see him, or we go and we hang out, or we go and we travel together, because there's not another person on earth who can sort of ground me
Mm-hmm.
the way that he does. So he's truly saved my life on so many different levels. Knowing that I am sort of responsible for him has become a way for me to live my life in the purest form and to try and live a healthy life and to make sure that like I am doing what's right for me, because at the end of the day what's right for me is going to be what will help him. So, yeah.
That's awesome. Okay, last question. How did your family function with your sibling having Down syndrome?
I have memories of it being really hard for my father to kind of come to terms with it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I come from like a very, very like culturally like strong like Armenian family, and I don't think that there is enough like education when it comes to mental illness
Mm-hmm.
and when it comes to disabilities. So a lot of um, his anger sort of got focused on, well, why can't he learn how to do it correctly? Like this shouldn't be hinder him. Like sort of like pushing him to his limits, and I know that it caused a lot of like tension and fights in the family because of it. Um, but as like time went on, as the years passed, I think like my mother has, there's just every single part of her body and every single part of her soul. She just like loves. She lives for my brother, and so do like all of my family members. He is really a beacon of light for everyone. Um, but I do know that it was definitely hard in the beginning. He had trouble eating certain foods, and everything was so specific, and communicating was really difficult. And um, but now it's like he's everybody's partner. Like
Mm-hmm.
everybody wants to surround themselves with him, because I think as we get older, we also realize like, oh, life isn't about the bullshit that we do day to day. Life is about enjoying life, and he is like the embodiment of that.
Yeah.
Um, so I think a lot of anger, and I think a lot of anxiety, and I think a lot of stress comes from um, just not knowing how to handle situations, not having the right language for it, not having the right education about it.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to tell a family who, was about to like welcome in uh, like a new member, a new little baby, and having no knowledge of the fact that like your kid is going to be born with such and such illness. Because when my mother was pregnant, they ran all the tests and they couldn't find anything, and it was just like right at that moment. So I think it was just sort of like everything hitting. But as time goes on, it's like you realize like there is really a plan for everything, and there's a reason why he's put in our lives. And yeah.
Thank you so much. That was all my questions.